To this On the Rocks hoedown as we spill all the tea about the first top major equity North American tour of Oklahoma in over 40 years. But this is not your grandma's musical. We are going to spill all the tea. We have actors Hennessey Winkler here and Gwynne Wood sharing their experience about this highly talked about and controversial reboot. Is it a reboot? We're going to talk about that of sorts. With me, your favorite host with the sassy most. Raise a glass and let the drinks begin. It's On the Rocks.
Thank you for being
Boulevard.
Life is a banquet, and most poor suckers are starving to death.
I'd like to propose a toast.
This is On the Rocks with Alexander, where I drink with your favorite celebrities as we talk about fashion, entertainment, pop culture, reality TV, and, well, that's about it. So pop a cork, lean back, and raise a glass to On the Rocks.
Fasten your seatbelt. It's going to be a bumpy night.
Buttons and bows and pantyhose, On the Rocks podcast, a place where we're too glam to give a damn. Like us on Twitter and Instagram at On the Rocks on Air, and on Facebook, On the Rocks Radio Show, even though you blocked me, Facebook, for a joke I made 4 years ago. And it wasn't even funny. Thanks, Facebook. Anyway, if you're on it, look us up. Send me an email. Book me for a wedding, funeral, quinceañera, bris. I don't care. I will show up and be your host. Info at ontherocksradioshow.com. The show's presented by Straw Hat Media. You can watch and or listen to our now over 300 episodes at ontherocksradioshow.com. Also watch us on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Facebook Watch, streaming with pride on SVTV and on Channel 31 on the East Coast. All right, let's get this show on the road. Let's talk about Oklahoma sweeping across North America. It's been reimagined for the 21st century, and it's as you've never seen or heard it before. It earned the Tony Award for Best Revival of a Musical. Funny, sexy, provocative, probing. It tells the story of a community banding together against an outsider, and it talks about the frontier life that has shaped America. Kind of upends the whole idea of the sunny romance of a farmer and a cowpoke. It allows the classical music and our country to be seen in a whole different light. And I had the opportunity to see it, and I was speechless, actually, which never happens to me. We have so much to talk about. The cast features trans actor Hennessey Winkler as Will Parker. It's Hennessey's first Broadway tour. Recent credits include DNA at La Jolla Playhouse and Nicholas in the new musical Far From Canterbury. Also, in addition, cast features non-binary swing Gwynne Wood. Cast is to understudy Laurey, Ado Annie, and Gertie. However, in Kansas City, it's from another musical. Like, this is a story from another musical. Also had the opportunity to go on as Will Parker. So we got two Will Parkers for you today. And this is also Gwynne's first national tour. It's directed by Daniel Fish. And it had its Los Angeles premiere September 3rd, and it plays through October 16th. And you would have to be under a rock if you haven't heard about this production, because everybody in town is talking about it. Let's take a look, and let's welcome our cast members. Let's take a look at Oklahoma.
Don't praise my charm too much. Don't look so vain with me. Don't stand in the rain with me. Don't touch my hat. People will say we're in love. And when they say, why you buy your yeah, we're only saying you're doing fine. Oklahoma, Oklahoma,
Please welcome Hennessey Winkler and Gwynne Wood. So I just have to say, welcome to the show. We have so much to talk about. I was like, okay, let's get to it. I listened to I listened to the Broadway cast recording of the revival, and I've read the reviews, so I didn't go in blindly of how the musical was kind of being retold, but I still wasn't prepared. Now, I know we're given like the soundbite of it's a retelling of the musical, but from your experience now, having been on stage with it, how would you explain this to somebody who's like, oh, Oklahoma, I love that show? How would you explain what is different and how it's different? And go.
Hennessey, do you want to take it?
Sure. So there's a line in the play
Well, for someone that loves the musical and is like, oh yay, I'm gonna go see Oklahoma. I'd be like, okay, it's not exactly like the movie, which is what I think a lot of people come and expect.
Right.
Although the script is the same as the original, which came out before the movie, and the music is the same, a little bluegrassy.
Yes.
I would say that it takes what our director Daniel Fish has done is he's taken this classical golden age musical and he's just turned it a little bit so that you see another perspective that's always been there, but you might not have paid much attention to, because in former versions, that those little storylines and plots were literally sung and danced over and dressed up with lots of costumes and glam, which is great. But I think Daniel loves musicals in a similar way that I do, especially these more classical ones, where it's like, wait a minute, did they just say that, or what's going on here? Let's look at that. Let's examine that. And I think it's just a re-examining. It's still very funny, and there's a lot of levity and beauty and love in there. And it just brings out a little bit more of the reality. And also, what I was going to say before is there's a line that Curly says in the show that's country's changing, got to change along with it.
Mm.
I think that this musical beautifully is able to change along with the country. What you come to see up on stage, you see America as it is today. You see what we all different bodies and people and represented. And I don't know, Gwen, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah. I mean, I think that what I loved about the show when I saw it on Broadway is how honest it was. Like, a lot of these lines, I think specifically what comes to mind as like the most clear example of it is like the smokehouse scene, which is in our production takes place completely in the dark, and it's dark literally, and also the content is very dark of that scene. And I think that before this production, most of the time, these sort of jabs that Curly is throwing at Judd, they're sort of said in like a jokey way almost. They're played for laughs. And this interpretation really sort of takes him at his word, where it's like this is what Rodgers and Hammerstein wrote. So let's make sure that what these characters are saying, they're being honest. Like, if he says, what, it sure be an interesting funeral, it's like, that's not a joke. It's like, wow, your funeral would really be interesting, sir. And like, what does it mean when we really like take what they're saying as the truth?
Yes.
Yeah.
Rather than playing for jokes.
And Gwen's talking about the smokehouse scene where in the movie you see it too, where Curly and Judd are talking to one another, and basically Curly is trying to talk Judd into killing himself. But in the movie, Judd is portrayed as this big burly, like a typical villain, basically.
100%.
Kind of a big, dumb, like, villain, and everyone's against him, including the audience. And this just humanizes everyone a little more.
Well, and to that, even just that one point, when we look at who the villains in our country are right now, it's like, they look like our neighbors. They are our neighbors in terms of like so many different ways. It's like, what is a villain anymore? And to your point, Gwynne, it's like everything when it goes to the dark and you're re-listening to the scene, because we do all always have that recording in our head of like, the Shirley Jones version. She was on the show too, by the way. I wonder if she has seen it. But there's always that kind of scene. And then when we have to revisit a scene that we think we know well, we really don't know well. And Hennessey, to your point also, a lot of these classic musicals that we're now seeing, now that we're hyper aware of certain themes, now that we're talking about certain themes openly, and now we're trying to be politically correct and inclusive, it's like some of these musicals did exactly talk about stuff that we're talking still about today, but to your point, just hidden under maybe a knee slap or a joke or a pretty song. And so I would say, if anything, what I would tell Oklahoma, anybody who's seen this production, is that it's extremely visceral. And it's there's no glitz or glamour to it. Yes, it's a musical, but it's really shedding light on some of the topics and on what you just said, on what America looks like today. Old, young, cis, non-binary, trans. This is what's happening in the world.
Black,
so
white, brown, yeah.
Exactly. this has very much surprised some of the older generations who maybe haven't read the reviews, and they're like, "Where's Shirley Jones? What's happening?" What would you say? Because I know some of the reviews have questions like, why do we need this total revamp? Why do we need to kind of turn this musical on your rotation and look from it from a different light? Why do we need to do this now?
I mean, I think that now is a great time for it. I think that revivals, the like meaning of revival sometimes in the past has been a little bit like watered down. What's interesting to me about a revival, I'm not saying you have to love it, but like it's interesting to look at the text and the music in today's context. Otherwise, what we're talking about and what some revivals are is more like a museum piece.
Exactly.
And there absolutely is room for that. Like I'm not saying that there's no place for that or that it's not innovative or exciting, but I think that when we do revivals, what's interesting about them is to contextualize them as we have more information about our world. We have different information about our society. And so like why not? You don't have to love it, but it's cool.
Just adding to that, like I think that, I mean, what is theater if not to challenge an audience, if not to have them leave with questions, if not to stir something up? And if you can take such a classic piece as this and bring it into today and let it touch people in a different kind of way, I mean, that's really giving it more life.
Exactly. It's not, Gwen, like you said, it's not a museum piece. It's not just a star vehicle for us to go look at a star. We're looking at a story being told from a full cast. This truly is an ensemble piece from start to finish. And that's what I love so much. There's so much chemistry and there's so many pieces that fit so well together for the whole thing. It's like everybody's in it, you know? It's like all hands in, really creating the stories, even from the set changes, even from some of the effects and the movement. It's beautiful when you look at it as that kind of ensemble piece, and that is what our nation looks like. And what I love from being from LA, it's come off the heels of Prom and some of these, you know, kind of musicals that you go and you have a good time. And the conversations that I heard at intermission were conversations that are being held like on the news and being held in debates. And it was interesting to hear some of the conversations that were happening with the older generation and the younger generation and the cross generation truly talking about themes that we should all be talking about in our homes. And it was so exciting to have theater do that again. It's like, we're ready for theater. We're done with COVID. We can, you know, now be challenged by theater instead of just kind of releasing and prepare for the future. We don't know what's going to happen with our society socially and politically. We really don't. So these are the conversations, you know, with Oklahoma. And I want to know what your experience with Oklahoma was before. Hennessey, I know, interesting for you, you had an audition for Oklahoma like 20 years ago. Did you have a callback for it? And it was in a whole different context. I want to know, were you a fan of the musical? And Gwen, I know, like, you're super young to the biz. Was this something that was part of your musical theater library along with, I don't know, Rent or anything else?
I did. I did have, in the mid 2000s, I was called back for Oklahoma as Ado Annie, actually. And so for me to be able to play Will Parker, her love interest, basically the male Ado in the show, it's really been full circle for me as an actor and as a trans man, and has really kind of beautifully marked my journey in all those ways. I'm just so grateful to be a part of it. And to be honest, I'm such a Will Parker anyway. Gwen could tell you, like...
Well, I have to tell you, you are certainly a natural. The minute you walk on stage, I'm like, yep, that's Will. And how special to show how much theater has evolved and how much we're now seeing, for you to share that story of your trans journey. And how special to be able to come back to the play as your true self. I think that's so beautiful and special. Now, but was it a musical that you kind of had, like, that you would listen to from time to time?
Well, I mean, Ado Annie's stuff was in my book. For sure. I loved, like all of us, right, Gwen? Like all of us femme
Oh yeah.
presenting people. Ado is in like a perfectly written character. So when it comes to having that classical theater legit piece, you have can't say no, in there. And my dad was always a really big fan of Oklahoma. It's his favorite musical, and so I grew up, knowing it, watching it, and hearing the music. And he was always captivated with how the voices were used in the elements of nature, like how the sopranos in Oklahoma replicated the wind,
Yeah.
sweeping down the plain, and all of that stuff. So yeah, I grew up as a fan of all these old musicals and newer ones as well, including Rent. I was in high school.
I love that that's like my point of reference for it being a new musical. It's not even a musical. That's how old I am. But Gwen, with this like new Broadway and there's the Hamiltons and all that, you come from a very much younger generation than I do. So I'm not sure how much Oklahoma was part of that kind of history. When I got into musical theater, I looked up every single musical I could, and I was listening to that, not Madonna. That was my life. So
Yeah.
what was your kind of familiarity with that?
So Oklahoma's always sort of been in my like periphery. My parents' wedding song was "People Will Say We're in Love." So they have a little music box like in their bathroom. So when I was a kid, I'd be like, ding, 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 ding. That's how I knew it. Um, and then my sister played Ado Annie in high school, which she was hysterical, just incredible. And I did a scene when I went to school at the Boston Conservatory in junior year. We did like a Rodgers and Hammerstein unit, and I was assigned Laurey, and this was before the revival. And I remember thinking to myself, is this a joke? Like, because it's like I'm not typically, somebody like me is not typically the romantic sort of like ingenue type. And I was like, why would they assign me this scene? And so obviously I really looked into Oklahoma then, did the scene, and when I auditioned and they asked me to read for Laurey and sing for Laurey, I was like, this is real. Like things are changing. Like Hennessey said, the line, country's changing, gotta
Yeah.
change along with it. Like I was like, no, I can do this. Like I can be desirable. I deserve people like me, like deserve love. We deserve to be seen and shown on stage. So yeah, it's been rather full circle for me as well. It's cool.
And it's funny, even when I was growing up, I was very, I knew exactly what kind of roles I could play. I could probably be in West Side Story, and that was probably about it. That was my experience. And now with shows like this, young people can come to the theater and see themselves represented in so many different roles. And so there's no limit as to what roles they think that they can play in the future, whether it's on stage or on screen. And I think that's so lovely. I'm wondering if this version of Oklahoma will start being done in high schools. A lot of high schools do Oklahoma as their spring musical, whatever, because it's the feel-good musical. I wonder if this is going to reflect and the youth are going to start demanding to tell the show like this.
I've wondered that same thing.
I've
Get
had
that
people reach out
big
to me.
green light out.
Yeah. Yeah.
People have contacted me and they're like, can you send me the orchestrations? I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm so sorry I can't, but
Yeah.
I do know from talking with our music director that having this version be licensable is a conversation. I don't know where they're at. Obviously, I'm not in those rooms, but I would hope so. I mean, I would be, if I was in high school and this version was able to be licensed, I'd be like so excited. I'd be campaigning at the door.
And we have a whole new generation now that loves this Rodgers and Hammerstein piece. So even if you're pissed off by it's getting people to love musical theater. It's getting people to love classic musical theater. It's the same. It's not the same orchestrations, but it's the same music. It's
Yep.
the same story.
And
I think that's important.
To your points, I heard lyrics that I had never really paid attention to before. I heard nuances. I heard harmonies that I had never experienced that made it more intimate. Even though it was on the Amundsen stage, it was still an intimate experience because the way it was presented. Now, I want to know about the audition process. I'm always so fascinated with the audition process for something that's been kind of changed, because you're not going to go in there and sing your soprano. People will say we're in love. What kind of direction did they tell you on your first audition? What was the callback like? What kind of direction did you get?
I auditioned for the show 7 times.
Oh my God!
We auditioned, I don't know, Gwynne, did you audition before the pandemic or like right around the beginning?
Yeah, I auditioned at the beginning of the pandemic.
Me too.
And then obviously nothing was happening. Like nothing was moving. And, we all were just sitting on our couches and praying and eating and watching TV. So
True story.
That was it for a while. But then as things started to open back up again, I taped for every character in the show. I taped for Ella. There is somewhere a video of me age 25 being you gotta be hardy. That is ridiculous. But basically, I think I might have sung a Carrie Underwood song or something for my preliminary. And then it was all just stuff from the show. And I really had a leg up because I had seen it on Broadway. So I knew the sort of style that they were going for.
Yeah, and I was called in for Will toward the beginning as well of the pandemic. And then I think in the middle of the pandemic, I auditioned again via video. And then when we were coming out of lockdown, I had a few in-person auditions. It was always Will they wanted to see me for. I do remember Daniel in the room, our director, having me do it, and then, okay, now do it all in a chair. So that was a thing. I feel like anytime I've auditioned for Daniel, he's been like, now do it in a chair. And it makes sense now because we're in chairs for a lot of the show. At the top, at least.
No.
But, yeah, it was wild. I love musicals in a very similar way I think that Daniel does, and it's been a dream to work with him. So the fact that I was even in the room, the fact that I even got to final callbacks for Will, I didn't think I got it because I didn't hear for weeks, and weeks. But I was just so grateful and proud and happy that I got as far as I did, And when I got it, it was just mind-blowing.
Has Daniel, the director, did he share where he kind of got this vision from? I'm not sure if I were to think of doing something that was a little grittier, a little, more conversation provoking, that I would, number one, pick up Oklahoma. Has he shared where that kind of spark came from?
He grew up listening to it with his parents. He, I think that they listened to different musical theater recordings. He loves the music. He loves it. And I think that he and I don't know if he and Daniel Kluger, who did the orchestrations, if they had worked together before, but I know that they've worked together since. And the two of them together, I think, I don't know, Daniel's done a lot of reconstructing and deconstructing and then reconstructing again different pieces. And I think that a lot of them, because I also did Most Happy in concert with him at Williamstown over the summer. And I think it comes from a love of the music.
Yeah. And a love of the full plot and the full truth of the piece. When this came out, there was a war going on. Right. People didn't want to go to the theater and be reminded of these subplots while their husbands and brothers and kids were at war. They wanted to leave with a happy feeling, and Rodgers and Hammerstein very brilliantly wrote this layered controversial subject matter into this musical that could still leave people with a happy feeling.
Talk to me about your creative process. And Hennessey, I want to start with you. The creative process of approaching a character that we've known and loved from stage. You're familiar with the music. Where do you start? Do you just start highlighting your lines? Do you do research into, well, I mean, even the time period has kind of shifted. So where do you start in developing this character to pay homage to the character, to pay homage to the new vision of the show, but also to make the character your own, especially for a tour?
I was lucky because I do believe Will and I are very similar. There wasn't a ton of work I had to do with it. He's also kind of the more human. I'd say Will is probably one of the most classic characters, maybe that people will see on stage up there, as to what they're used to seeing. Daniel made it very clear to all of us when we got this job that we were cast because he wanted us in these characters. Mm-hmm. So he wanted us to wrap the characters around who we are, and not necessarily become another person. So we were able to bring ourselves to them. And it's like when we're all hanging out together, we'll be like, oh, Gwen is such an Ado, or Henny's such a Will, or Sean is such a Curly. But that's because we are ourselves up there in these given circumstances and in these, given character situations. But we truly are being ourselves, and we each bring ourselves to it, which is so fun when one of the understudies gets to come on, because it's a different show. It's a different character because it's them. And it makes it really fun to be able to play with different people in that way. It's not just a stock. Here it is. It's set. This is what it is. This is the character that you're playing. You're going up there as yourself. That was really cool.
Well, and as an audience member, I really, really felt that. There was a sincerity to the performances. It wasn't so much like, wink, smile at the audience, let me face forward for the audience till I can do my jazz hands. It was really real people on stage and different personalities. It read so clearly as not acting, because obviously you're acting, but it was so effortless and it was so natural. It was extremely well done, but in terms of actors, when you know that they're acting, especially in musical theater, it kind of stripped that level away, which kind of strips a wall away from the audience and the character. When somebody's, jazz handsing to you, you appreciate it, but still there's that, they're acting, they're presenting, and that's kind of taken away. And so there's this relationship.
I interact with the audience all the time.
Yeah.
When I'm up there. Maybe too much.
Well, no, but it's so natural because it's like, yes, that's his character. That's who he really is. That's him enjoying telling this story, which I really, really appreciated. And Gwynne, as an understudy, I think an understudy is one of the most terrifying roles in musical theater, because we all have those actor nightmares that we have to stand in for somebody. We haven't had the rehearsal. And then they're like, oh, yeah, we're not just going to have you understudy one. We're going to have you understudy a few characters. And then, oh, guess what? Tonight, you're Will Parker.
Yeah, that was really crazy. I still can't believe it really happened.
So as an understudy, how did you work on kind of creating these characters and kind of being ready to have them at will?
So I had never understudied before. It was incredibly daunting to me immediately that there are no ensemble tracks. That's why we're all considered understudies rather than swings, because every time we go on, it's for a principal, no matter who it is. So yeah, I was certainly daunted, but kind of like Henny was saying, when we finally got our chance to sort of sit down with the associate director, Michaela, who's literally amazing, she was like, don't feel like you have to overdo it. It's kind of like the analogy that I think of is like, if you tell me and Henny to eat a sandwich, the sandwich is going to get eaten, but we're not going to do it the same way. So it's sort of like there's certain things about the characters, like Gertie is fun. What does she want? Gertie on stage is always going to want to have sex with Curly. Always. Like that's consistent, but my energy is my own. same with Annie or Laurey. And that was the craziest thing about Will, was that I didn't even have time to like prepare character wise. I mean, it was just me. It was just me up there.
Yo, let me tell you, they were in Kansas City. I was in Nashville with COVID, along with
Lord.
two of our other castmates.
Yeah.
We were quarantined, and I was so upset to miss Kansas City because Will's song is Kansas City.
Right.
And then, so not only was I out, we had two other actors out. So all of our understudies were being utilized, and there was no more understudy for Will. So Gwynne was like, I mean, it was like, well, you can do it. We know you can, and you're not binary. Like, you can do them all. Just get up there, and they killed it. I mean, they.
It was wild. They were like, "What if you did?" And I was like,
"Gwynne, I could not stop thinking about you that whole time while I was quarantined in my hotel room. I was like, why aren't they texting me? Like, I need to know what's happening. Like, oh my god." But yeah,
because
MVP. Gwynne Wood, everybody. MVP of Broadway tours.
Now this is both of your first national tour. Any actor that comes and talks about their first national tour, it's always very eye-opening. You know, you think you know what you're getting into, but then actually doing it, being on the road from city to city, doing 8 shows a week, or standing by and stepping in at the last minute, and then having to travel, even though it's family. We know family can be family sometimes. It's not always, you know. Can you tell me what have you learned the most about the business, but also about yourself from kind of being on the road and touring?
I love it. I learned that I love it. I love touring. I like being on the road. I'm a rambling man.
Will Parker, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's been crazy. I love to travel. I love seeing all of these new places. I also think that I've never spent a year of my life more stressed, because I'm a naturally like kind of anxious person. And so I'm always like trying to think 10 steps ahead. And as an understudy, I'm like, okay, well, if this person goes out, then meanwhile, like, nobody's sick. And in my head, I'm like, well, if this person goes out, then that means I'm gonna have to do this. So like,
you have to.
It's been kind of crazy. But also I love it. And like, I do feel like we have a sense of community in like little like micro bubbles, and then it just grows outward and outward until we're finally in these communities that we know essentially nothing about, like the communities of each different city, and we're sharing ourselves with them. And that's really, I mean, it's really something special that I had never experienced before touring.
Can you share with us some about the honesty about touring? Because we know not every city is like Los Angeles, and the show is quite eye-opening for certain cities. Has it ever become something where you've been a little nervous about coming to a certain city or doing a show? Can you share a little bit about that? Because that's also a risk of this show, is the whole ensemble is putting everything out there. There's really nothing that you're kind of hiding, which could be scary in some parts of the U.S. Can you talk about that?
We travel with a security guard. We traveled through the South in all these states that hold this musical in the fabric of their upbringing. We went into the South and the Midwest. We had chunks of audiences leave after Act 1. We would consider it a win if not half the audience was gone after Act 1.
I bet the producers love that.
Sure. But at the same time, the people that left, it's like, good riddance. You know, we know why you're leaving. And it's probably not, we probably don't want you here anyway for it. We upset a lot of people with this show. I say, if you're not a musical person, you might love this, you know, as well. This is a musical for people that don't like musical theater, in my opinion, I think. I have a very tumultuous relationship with musical theater myself, and I love this show. But yeah, it's been wild. It's been a wild ride. I think I mean, LA has been some of our most giving, loving, wonderful audiences. But yeah, it can get really disheartening sometimes. We've had to directly speak to the audience to remind them that we are not avatars but human beings, and that they need to stop having a full out at loud voice conversation in the front row because we're working.
Right.
We've had people screaming at us as they walked out. This musical is rock and roll, man. Like, but that's what I was saying about theater, you know, if it doesn't jostle something in you, what are we doing here? So, you know, that all sounds negative, but in reality, I mean, I think we all kind of collectively came to this place. I'm talking for myself, but I feel like a lot of us just came to this place where it was like, yeah, okay, this is what it is. And we know what we're doing. We know what we're here for. We have a story to tell, and we're going to tell it. And if it pisses you off, then you can leave. And hopefully, ideally, you know, you'll question why it pissed you off so much.
I would definitely venture to say the people that left, and these are exactly the conversations that I was hearing. There were conversations being had because people couldn't wait to talk about it, whether they loved it or whether they didn't understand it or whatnot. But the people that left, I guarantee you, they texted 5 people on their way out who are like, "Oh God, that sounds interesting. I want to go see that."
Exactly. And but you know what? Those were some of also the most powerful places we were in, because I'd have young trans guys in the middle of Alabama emailing me, being like, "Oh my God, this musical like saved my life," or like, "I can't believe that you're up there doing this. I never thought it was something I could do," or "I saw myself up there," or whatever it is, you know. I mean, and that's worth all the walkouts. That's worth the whole theater of walkouts. So yeah, you know, I mean, in that respect, it's, you know, it's been a challenge, but I think it's just kind of shows that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And those are the people that needed to see this, you know. They needed to get upset, and they needed to feel like, but you know what? On the other hand, it's like, come on, you know, when else are you going to see? This is a real piece of New York theater.
Right.
Born and bred in Brooklyn, you know what I mean? Like, brought up in Brooklyn. It's got experimental elements. It's got, like, beautiful, just theatrical elements in it that you're not going to see anywhere else. So it's like
the Dream Ballet,
a real piece of New York theater right here in Alabama, and that's something.
100%. I wish I owned the hashtag Dream Ballet sequence because everybody's talking about it. And you are right. It is a very real sense of theater. And when we look back at history, we look back at shows other people have walked out on that have been so controversial. And we look back at them and it was like, Hair, exactly. And we look back and we're like, wow, that changed Broadway and it progressed Broadway into the future. So, you know, who knows what kind of conversation we're going to be having about this production in 10 years, 20 years, and how it's really going to change. What has been the most challenging aspect for you personally for the show, whether it's related to business or personally? What has challenged you the most?
I think maybe fighting my own biases against myself and like realizing that like whoever I do go on as, like, I am, this sounds schmaltzy, but like I am enough. Like I don't have to put anything on, kind of like what we were talking about before. It's like we were hired because we are the people that we are. We look the way that we look, we sing the way that we sing, etc., etc. And, you know, there's like an intense
pressure. We're really good
looking
too. This cast is so hot, and we're all very talented, if you ask me.
Well, I will let you know. I was looking at a few of the Instagram profiles after the show because I was like, hello. Very
it's Cincy, Oklahoma. At least come for the eye candy.
Very much eye candy. And Gwynne, I love that you said that. You know, sometimes as actors, we get roles that we're not so comfortable with, whether it's because it's challenging our ability or whether it's because it's challenging our own view of our own bodies or our own, you know, who we would cast ourselves in. So I love that you shared that. And what a special experience to be able to change that kind of norm, but also terrifying. So my hat's off to you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been really, yeah, I feel like a much more confident person. Like, as far as, it's like not even that I ever was like, I'm not talented enough. But it's like you do have to bolster yourself constantly as an actor, especially like, I mean, I was out of school for like 1 year, and then we had the pandemic, and I was like, okay, cool. Like, I'm a million years behind everyone else because nothing is happening.
Well,
But yeah.
we're talking about the norms on stage for Oklahoma, and then we're juxtaposing it around a time that people are freaking out as to what color the skin are of a mermaid who's a fairy tale character. So it's like we're having this conversation of what is it that what is the norm anymore, and whose problem is it? Hennessey, I want to know what your biggest challenge for doing this show has been.
Honestly, I think the biggest challenge for me is if there's anything going on in your life that requires attention and you leave for tour, it really like elongates those things and draws them out. It's hard to kind of live the other side of your life at the same time while you're away from it. And trying to be responsible to the life and the people in your life, and also being away and being busy all the time or tired and traveling. I think that's been the most challenging thing, is just finding a blend, trying to be present in your life and on tour at the same time.
I can imagine that would be exhausting, and then week after week goes by, and you're thinking, oh, I'll take care of stuff, or I'll follow up with that friend or that family member next week, and then 3 weeks have gone by, and it's like
that.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my God.
And I wonder how
also auditioning and like things like that, or looking for, because we don't stop trying to find work. We know that this job is ending, so auditioning from a hotel room. Trying to do, even things like this from a hotel room, finding the right lighting in a hotel room. It's like, I'm like, I'm like writing my agent, like, please tell them I did this from a hotel room. Like,
but I have to say, maybe it's a little lonely at times as well, even though you have your show family, but then to kind of just have your own, nobody that really knows you from the past, or even your family or chosen family. Does it get a little lonely on the road as well?
I think so. I mean, I miss my friends and family so much. I feel like I am sometimes a little irritating because I'll just text them and be like, hey, I don't have anything to say, but I love you and I miss you, bye. Because there's like a hole missing in my life of those relationships that I feel like really like nurture me and that bring me joy. I will say, bring me some tea.
I love the tea, girl.
Okay. So,
all the tea.
I don't have a romantic partner or anything. And I can tell you, as far as loneliness goes, there was something that began kind of like, I forget where in the tour. It was very cold, and me and a few other people started this thing called Hoklahoma.
Why wasn't I invited? Just kidding. I started Swoklahoma. It's fine.
Yeah,
there you go.
Like, there's so much out there, and I'm not saying that those sort of encounters, like, they don't fill the whole like friends and family, but
Gwynne, your Instagram, your DMs are just gonna blow up now. They're like, Oklahoma's in town. Did you hear?
Hello, yes.
I do want to talk.
Look, I stayed next door to Gwynne. Once.
Oh no! Was the door knocking?
I can attest to that.
Mm-hmm.
So proud. Let me pop a
Not endorsed. Not endorsed by Oklahoma.
Right.
Oh yes, it is. Are you kidding me?
I absolutely love that because I'm always one for shenanigans. But I want to talk about labels. I have a love-hate as a queer man. I have such a love-hate with labels because sometimes when I'm introduced as, oh, here's the gay journalist or the gay podcaster, I'm like, why I gotta be gay? Like, can't I just be a great podcaster? And we know the headlines, for good reason, come with, Hennessey, you are referred to as the trans actor who's playing Will Parker.
Sometimes when I'm lucky.
Well, I mean, so that's just what I want to talk about. And Gwynne, everybody introduce you as, you're the non-binary understudy. And these are the headlines that I get when I get all the press releases. And it's like, okay, why... does there come a point where we're using it just to kind of be part of like the hot topic buzz? Do you ever feel overshadowed by your label, I guess is what I'm asking. And it's like, that's the focus. It's like, well, no, I'm a really good actor in the show. I'm a great singer. I'm a great performer. Like, this is what we should be talking about first and foremost. Does it ever become a part that overshadows?
So I can't speak for the other trans people in the play or, anyone else but myself. Personally, my trans advocacy and queer advocacy comes in the form of, if you ask me about it, I want to talk about it. And I decided that at the beginning of this tour. Also for me, as a trans man, trans male erasure in the industry is a real thing. A lot of people don't know we exist. They know that our sisters exist.
100%.
But they don't know about us. And so I've really reveled when people do their research and find out that I'm trans and mention that, or when they ask me about it. I love it. It helps me feel seen in a way that sometimes I feel that part of my identity is a little bit not seen, which it's a double-edged sword, right?
Right.
Because that's sometimes why one goes through physical transition, so he can be seen as himself. But when you do that, you lose a little bit, for me anyway. And so I've taken the opportunities often as I can to talk about it. I'm proud. I'm proud to be a trans man on a Broadway tour, and I would love to see what I'm doing open up doors for other trans masculine and trans male people, actors, trying to do the same thing that I'm doing. So I really have no issues with it. If you come to see the show, you'll see that I'm a great actor. You'll see that I show up. You'll see that I'm professional, and all that's a given. But that trans masculine representation is something that I really hold dear to my heart, and I'm honored to be a voice of that if I can be. And I'm not a big of an advocate. I'm not out there like that, just because I'm just very disorganized and I can't. But if people want to come up and talk to me or write a story about it or ask me about it, 100%, let's talk about it.
Well, and Hennessey, what a decision that must have been for you to come out as trans, knowing at the time, and very slowly happening, that you can play a role like this. What roles you would be able to play, or would you just be cast in experimental theater for the rest of your career? And now you're in a Broadway national tour, so that must have been terrifying. Even that aspect of making the decision to come out. Can you talk a little bit about what kind of sparked that moment? You're like, this is a decision, and I'm coming out now.
Well, I came out about 10 years before I started physically transitioning. And the reason I held off so long on doing that was because I was an actor. Mm-hmm. My book was filled with female songs. I was trained as a female. I danced as a female, all the roles. I didn't want to start all over. And I feel like even before a trans person, I'm an actor. I'm a storyteller. Mm-hmm. So, and I had done pretty well looking like a woman, and I liked how I came across. I liked how my humor came across. I thought I was really strong. I had an incredible high belt, soprano notes. My range was, I was really afraid to give that up. All those years and years and years and years of training. And So, and that was a whole pick your battles type thing. People would she me all the time, but it's like I was going out for female roles. So long as my close friends and family that knew I was a man used the correct pronouns, I was fine with that. Because I knew what I looked like and I know the world I'm in. Um, it's been very affirming now, after having transitioned. This is like my first, job after that. And so it's been really affirming. It's like the universe just kind of telling me I'm on the right track, because I feel like I kind of hit a plateau after a while. It's like they didn't know I was a man, but they could sense that something,
Right.
and this has been my whole life, it was like, we really like you, but there's something off. It's like they could see me even though they didn't know.
Well,
So yeah, I've never really been in any closet. I don't go around like you were mentioning earlier, being like, "Hi, I'm trans Hennessey." I
Right.
just like to meet people as myself, which is a privilege that I get to have now. And then if they find out about me being trans, or if I can use it to my advantage in this industry, which we're at a point in time now where I can use it to my advantage, I will play that card to get jobs, to get work, to talk about it, because you got to take the good things that you can when you're given a situation like this in the world, And we're at a time in history now where it's just like this weird cusp of a wave, and it's like, you know what? I'm gonna ride it. I'm gonna ride the wave. I'll ride the trans wave. I'll check your boxes in casting, whatever you want. Just give me the job, because once I show up, I'll blow your socks off.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That was beautifully said, and what a great story to share. So thank you for sharing that with us. And Gwynne, I want to talk about non-binary. Non-binary is a term that was not around when I grew up. Not even 5 years ago, really, was part of like normal conversation. And then my assumption, and this is part of my ignorance and not really knowing, is like, oh, non-binary means somebody dresses up androgynously. What I love about your social media is we see you so colorful and we see so many different expressions of you. And so I want to know, what is your definition for yourself of being non-binary, and how does that work in your role as an actor?
Yeah, so that's something that I'm figuring out like literally every day still. Um, but my like personal definition for myself of being non-binary is quite literal, that I don't feel comfortable existing within the binary of like I am a woman or I am a man. It's like for my whole life I've felt that my sort of gender expression, it was constantly sort of fluid and changing, and it is fascinating to me now as far as like where our non-binary representation is. I am so grateful that it is on the ascent. But it's interesting because, like you were saying, I a lot of the times will present sort of like hyper femme, like
Right.
cartoony.
Yes.
And I still don't, when I'm dressing like that, I still don't feel like a woman. I don't. Like, I'm like, this is how I am for the day. And it's more like a Muppet rather than a lady. And that sort of representation is not visible right now. It is androgyny. It's the half of your head is shaved.
Exactly.
You have nose piercings. You're skinny. You don't really have a chest. You don't really have, it's like, and that's totally cool. But it's also like, I think that we are in the entertainment industry right now thinking of non-binary as a third gender, and that being non-binary is this sort of what's the word, like homogenous sort of skinny white most of the time, like edgy person.
Right.
And I don't fit that, and I know a lot of other non-binary people don't fit that either. So it's like I'm grateful when people like use I use she they pronouns. I'm grateful when people use they pronouns for me. I'm grateful when they don't refer to me as hey ladies, like over here, all that sort of stuff, because I am aware of the way that I present. And right now I feel like I'm having to fight against what the industry and what our society is sort of telling the masses that non-binary is.
Absolutely love that, and that's exactly what the show is doing. It's changing our view on every aspect, and so I love it. I thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your story. The show is trailblazing. You both are trailblazers on your own and what you're doing, and how you're changing norms and how you're changing old queers like me that have to adjust the way that I think and the way that I talk to become a representative of my community correctly. And it's really, really exciting. Last question for both of you.
Well, we're grateful for you, too.
Yeah.
For doing that. We need allies within our community, and that's really important.
Well, thank you for that. Okay, last question. If you were given the rights to your dream reboot of a classic musical theater piece and give it the Oklahoma treatment, what show would you pick?
Oh. Wait.
That's a really good question.
It is really
Carousel.
good.
Yeah, well, and talking about another dark piece that you look at today and you're horrified with all of the themes. When I wrote this question down, I was like, oh, I would definitely do Carousel.
I would love to see Daniel get his hands on Carousel.
Yeah. Well, he's proven himself with another RNH, so.
Yeah.
Don't say Rent.
Okay. No, Rent, a classic.
Yes.
No. I'm sort of stealing this from Twitter because it was somebody's like joke idea that they had, but I think it'd be fierce. If you did like Grease.
Oh, okay.
Like part of me, like there's some crazy stuff in the original script of Grease as far as like the pregnancy and the drug use and like all that sort of stuff, and it's always like I don't know. Also, like to me personally, like Sandra Dee is not really a feminist icon.
Right. That would be very interesting.
Yeah, I'm like, why don't we sort of like? I'd be interested to see the Pink Ladies, sort of like their struggles, and then like the Greaser guys dealing with their own sort of sense of like, I don't know, teenage masculinity and sexuality and all that stuff. Like that to me could be kind of fascinating.
I absolutely love that. And have you
weird,
seen A High School Nowadays? I mean, it's so colorful and so inclusive. I think that that's such a great idea. That'd be very, I wonder how much we change. I love that. Thank you both so much. Can you tell our audience where you want them to find and follow you? Hennessey, you first.
Well, my website is hennessy.nyc, spelled like the cognac. And my social media handle is Hennessey Howley. Howley is spelled Haole, and it is slang for white person in Hawaii, because that's where I'm from.
I knew you were from there, and I wondered, okay, that's interesting. All right. And Gwen, where can people find and follow you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram and TikTok at Gwynne, my weird spelling that is on the screen, Laurel, Laurel, my middle name. And then on Twitter, I'm sometimes a little bit of a goofy guy under the handle pasta_baby.
Also, Oklahoma. That's going to be a hashtag, Oklahoma. Thank you both so much. Oklahoma is playing at the Amundsen in Los Angeles until the 16th. Also touring around, so make sure that you go see it. And that's all, folks. It's always a grab bag of fun here every time on the Rocks. Big thank you to our engineer, Tony Sweet, our social media clip editor, Alexis Mendez, our researcher, Mama Rose. Coming up, we have Disney and Hairspray actor Garrett Clayton is here, Food Network's Zach Young, and this just in, our Halloween show. If you're a fan of the original show Charmed, we have 3 of the original cast members, and they're big. I'm not going to spill the tea just yet. Please like, share, subscribe so we can continue bringing the show to you coming your way. Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, stay sexy, and of course, stay tipsy. We'll see you next week. This has been another episode of On the Rocks. Tweet me and slide into my DMs on Twitter and Instagram at On The Rocks On Air. Find everything On The Rocks for free at OnTheRocksRadioshow.com. Subscribe, like, review, and share. Until next week, stay fabulous.